Xylo Forbartz. Arguably the most criminal hero in anime, Xylo is a former Holy Knight captain sentenced to be a hero after sending a goddess to the afterlife. And instead of learning his lesson, he goes on to form another contract, this time with the sword goddess Tearita. Now as a penal hero, he's thrown into battle against the forces of not one, but multiple demon kings. Xylo was once the captain of the Federated Kingdom's 5th Order of Holy Knights. His fall began when he was accused of taking Senerva's life, the very goddess he had a pact with. This crime led to the first trial in history for slaying a goddess, and the result was already decided before the trial even began. As punishment, Xylo was expelled from the Holy Knights and sentenced to fight forever as a hero. The clearest demonstration of Xylo's combat style is how he uses sacred seals instead of relying solely on swordsmanship. His main weapons are knives, but the real power comes from the seals engraved on his body. According to the novel, and consider this your spoiler warning from here on, one of the 2 seals Xylo is allowed to keep is the Seal of Heat and Light, officially named Zate Find. Known in the ancient language as Big Candy, his seal was a cutting-edge tool created to fight the demon Blight. It allowed him to turn objects into explosive weapons by channeling the seal's power through them. Basically, it was kind of like a flashy firecracker he could throw. When Xylo uses Zate Find, the explosion does not come from the knife itself, but from the sacred seal on his palm. Even a low-level blast releases massive heat and pressure that can tear apart trees and rocks. If Xylo pushes it further, the blast is strong enough to reduce a small house to ash. Xylo's controlled attacks are often limited to the size of a carriage-wide blast. But the real drawback of Zate Find became clear after his sentencing. Once the sacred seal is used, the object used as the catalyst is often destroyed by the explosion. As a Holy Knight, Xylo received special knives designed for this purpose. But now, as a hero, he has to use whatever he can find. Unfortunately, when he was sentenced to be a hero, almost all of his sacred seals were taken away or made useless. This was one of the only 2 he still had left. Xylo's second remaining seal is Sakura, a flight seal named after a dragonfly in the ancient kingdom's language. This seal strengthens his physical abilities, especially his jumping power, allowing him to leap more than 3 times his own height by easing the laws of physics. While it does not grant true flight, it lets him stay in the air for short periods, which is enough for aerial combat. The best example of how Xylo dominates the battlefield is the Bellicourt Thunderstroke seal compound installed in his body. This seal was built for aerial battles and allows him to fire explosive attacks while mid-air. Made to fight flying fairies, mastering it required intense training, since it involved moving through the air while landing fast and accurate strikes. But Xylo is one of the few specialists in the entire kingdom capable of using it properly. Bellicourt Thunderstroke was especially effective in defensive battles. With Tearita supplying him with swords, Xylo could fight endlessly. He could increase the blast power to hit distant targets, or wipe out groups of enemies in a single strike. Even heavily armored bogarts were reduced to dust. As a Holy Knight, Xylo had access to even stronger seals. Jayce had a long range, wider area coverage, and way more raw power. Yaklid could punch straight through something as tough as a castle wall. He even had seals specifically designed for siege combat. Xylo also carried a far superior detection tool, a probe seal called Lorad. However, these sacred seals, along with many others, had already been suppressed. They could only be reawakened through special means, which meant Xylo couldn't use them anymore. Still, he remembered how they felt, but relying on that memory, he could potentially recreate something similar on his own. But it was only a rough imitation, nowhere near the original seal's full power. Xylo's biggest turning point came after a near-death battle with the Demon King. Though Xylo survived, the experience left him unable to properly feel pain. This only made him more dangerous on the battlefield, but also to himself, since he might not immediately notice when he was close to losing one of his many lives. After piling up achievements with Tearita and the powerful heroes in his unit, Xylo gained fame he never wanted. People started calling him names like the Lightning Bolt, the Demon Lord Hunter, and the Thunder Falcon. To his annoyance, many saw him as some mysterious legend and even asked him for autographs. Despite all of this, Xylo openly admits that he is terrible at swordsmanship. He learned it because Holy Knights were expected to, but he was only average at best. But things became clear when his past was revealed. You see, Xylo despises the Holy Knights and the nobles who support them, especially those who set him up. So much so that he plans to annihilate every one of them someday. He is painfully aware of one flaw in himself. He hates being underestimated. That is why in one episode, he still chose to save the Holy Knights despite everything they had done to him. The truth behind his sentencing lies with a mysterious group that wants Xylo sleeping in the coffin. Before the crime, Xylo led his unit to fight Demon Blight number 11. Before daybreak, he entered battle alongside the goddess Senerva. Though reinforcements were promised to him, they never arrived. Instead, Xylo received official orders delivered by a messenger, complete with a sacred seal proving they came from Galtal Fortress. The orders claimed an allied unit, Infantry Division 7110, was isolated and needed rescue. The thing is, that unit never existed. The Confessor later claimed the orders were fake, despite the seal proving otherwise. Xylo was framed as a glory seeker who acted without permission to make a name for himself. In reality, he followed what he believed were real orders. Xylo did end Senerva's life, but he had no choice. Senerva pushed herself beyond her limits, believing she would be praised and thanked by the unit they were sent to save. When her power ran out, she became weak and defenseless, allowing the Demon Blight to begin consuming her. Since it goes against their doctrine, where they believed that goddesses are perfect beings, the temple denied the possibility that a goddess could lose all her power, hiding this truth from the public. If Senerva had fully been consumed, a demon lord with the powers of a goddess could have been born. To prevent that, Xylo ended her life. During the trial, he no longer cared about defending himself. He only wanted the world to know what Senerva had sacrificed her life for. After being sentenced, Xylo swore revenge on those responsible for the deaths of his knights and Senerva. Xylo's hatred for goddesses comes from this experience. He despises how easily they accept dying for praise or recognition. It fills him with rage because it mirrors his own flaws. He hated Teorita at first for the same reason. But over time, Xylo understood that Teorita and he were the same. Both were risking their lives because they cared deeply about how others saw them. If he's bothered about Teorita's self-sacrifice, he realizes he can just work hard to protect her. When fighting alongside Teorita, Xylo's awareness sharpens. Generally, goddesses act like a second set of eyes for their knights, sharing vision and watching blind spots through a deep mental connection. This bond also helps stabilize his mind, just as he helps protect hers. Originally a method for processing information far quicker than having a conversation, this method allows a goddess and her chosen knight to crush thousands of enemies without slowing down. Now for the juicy parts. Here's a quick pinch of spoiler warning before we get into some major details about Xylo himself. If you want to skip spoilers, jump to the timestamp on screen for the next hero. Outside of battle, Xylo has a surprising hobby. He enjoys reading poetry, especially works by someone called Altoyard Comet. His tragic poems resonate with Xylo so deeply that if he had not joined the military, he believed he might have tried becoming a poet himself. Another painful part of Xylo's life is his fiancée, Frenzy Mastabolt. As a child, Xylo's family was wiped out by the Demon Blight, leaving him the only survivor. The Mastabolt family took him in, and for the sake of his bloodline, he agreed to an engagement with Frenzy. After becoming a hero, Xylo considers the engagement over and wants to avoid causing trouble for Frenzy's father, whom he deeply respects. Frenzy does not agree though. She insists they are still engaged, calls him her husband, and helps him with his missions. She even forces her clan to recognize their marriage through methods that she calls persuasion. Frenzy's greatest fear is that Xylo will forget her as he dies and revives again and again as a hero. As the Thunder Falcon, Xylo became one of the most feared penal heroes in existence. With his fellow morally bankrupt heroes, Xylo destroyed demon lords, wiped out countless fairies, and survived impossible missions. Dotta Lazulis. Dotta is the unit's main scout and infiltrator. A penal hero infamous for sneaking, stealing, and gathering information where no one else can. This resident burglar goes where others cannot, and takes what the unit needs to survive. The clearest demonstration of Dotta's talent is his strange sixth sense. His fear sharpened him to the point where he could sense the presence of other living beings with extreme accuracy. It was not just good night vision. He could measure distance to targets almost perfectly, even without seeing them clearly. His biggest strength came from sneaking. Walls are basically no different from hallways to Dotta. He could climb them silently, as if he were walking on flat ground. According to some absurd rumors, Dotta's gloves and shoes had claws, and he could even crawl across ceilings if needed. According to Tsav and Xylo, Dotta has superhuman talent when it comes to sneaking. Or maybe he's just an idiot beyond human understanding. After stealing something, he always runs to places with fewer people, knowing that gives him a better chance to escape. The best example of his infiltration skills was when he led his subordinates, known as Dotta's goons, into an enemy mercenary base. While his men dealt with the guards in the way, Dotta slipped past fences, climbed over walls, and moved across rooftops. By destroying enemy bases like this, they've successfully ruined their supply lines and made future battles easier for the unit. To Dotta, sneaking was not something that could be taught easily. He believed it depended entirely on the individual. Height, hand size, body type, and movement all mattered. Everyone had their own way of sneaking, which is why he saw it as a personal skill rather than a shared one. Once, with the help of his adjutant, Dotta hid among human corpses being carried by a fairy in a cart. Dotta's weapon is a thunder staff called Hilk, an outdated product made by the Verkal Development Corporation. Its sacred seal allowed it to fire lightning bolts that were hard to dodge or block. However, it was difficult to aim and was only slightly better than a crossbow. Dotta was not skilled at controlling sacred seals, which made him nearly useless in direct combat against fairies. On top of that, his aim was so terrible that even when fairies rushed him all at once, he could barely slow them down. But things became interesting when his personality was revealed. Dotta did not like hurting people. This was ironic, considering he broke into homes and stole from others for a living. Before he was sentenced to be a hero, Dotta even cut down people during his burglaries. Dotta's sticky fingers were legendary. He was sentenced to be a hero after being found guilty of treason. Before his arrest, he had been involved in more than 1,000 burglary cases. He'd steal anything. Xylo still laughs when he remembers the day he heard how Dotta even stole one of the royal family's dragons. But the smile didn't last long, because right after that, he found out that the dragon had eaten Dotta's left arm. Despite this, his stealing was extremely useful to the unit. Generally, penal heroes received very little support from the army. Xylo often orders Dotta to sneak into noble mansions, steal valuables, and use them to hire mercenaries or gather supplies. Things that would normally be impossible for penal heroes became easy with Dotta around. If you walk through the street stalls with him, it turns into an all-you-can-eat buffet. But the real problem was his lack of restraint. Dotta struggled to stop himself from stealing. He would question why they should steal from a noble to hire mercenaries, when he could just steal from the mercenaries themselves. He would even go back to places he had already robbed, thinking he could take more. Now that we're done with abilities, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Dotta's real crime. This part includes big spoilers, so skip to the timestamp on screen if you want the next hero instead. Dotta's crime came into full view during his trial. After being arrested many times, Dotta escaped easily. Turns out that he already had the key to his cell, long before he was ever imprisoned. At the time, he hadn't had a real reason for stealing it. He figured he could, so he did. His fatal flaw was his own impatience. Even though nobody could catch him, his luck eventually ran out. After being captured a 4th time, he was finally locked in a castle cell. Dotta thought the court was just another place meant to shame him. As he stood there, he rubbed the stub of his missing arm. Nearby was the dragon he had stolen. When Dotta reflected on his failures, he did not regret committing crimes. What bothered him was his poor execution and his motive. He believed he failed because he was not stealing for himself. When the court accused him of over 1,000 crimes, Dotta was shocked. Not because it was unfair, but because he had stolen far more than that. Yet he was charged with only one crime, stealing the dragon from the stables. Things became strange when he learned what he was really accused of. The dragon was present as evidence, but the real target, the crowned prince, was missing. Dotta claimed the prince had asked him for help. According to Dotta, the prince said something was wrong with the royal family, and he was living like a prisoner. However, the confessor denied everything and claimed the prince never tried to escape. When Dotta said that the king had started acting strangely, and that the chancellor might be involved, he was immediately silenced. From what Dotta had seen, the prince was around 10 years old and terrified. It was the first time Dotta had seen someone more afraid than himself. The prince was desperate enough to ask an escaped prisoner for help, and that desperation moved Dotta. Although many misunderstood him, Dotta believed he had a conscience. He had a soft spot for those weaker than himself and felt no desire to help the powerful. The problem was that there weren't many people weaker than Dotta. The prince barely made the cut, and later in the series, you'll see Dotta saving other people like that too. However, choosing to help the prince was where everything went wrong. Truthfully, Dotta didn't care if he was the one who saved the prince. He just wanted someone to do it. He was supposed to be put to death, but instead, the Central Noble Alliance and the king sentenced him to be a hero. After receiving a fate worse than death, all Dotta could think about was how badly he had failed. If he ever got another chance, he was sure he could steal the prince the right way. This time, he would do it for himself. No matter what happened, even if the prince said no or even died, Dotta swore he would steal him out of that castle. Venetim Leopold. Venetim is a Penal Hero Unit 9004's fraud. He is the so-called commander of the Penal Heroes, a con artist and a political criminal who rarely sets foot on the battlefield. Instead, he stays behind and directs the unit from a distance. usually calling in only to announce that something has gone wrong or that the situation's about to get worse. Venetim communicates with the heroes through a sacred seal on their necks, which allows long-distance voice transmission. This makes him the main link between the unit and the higher-ups. Basically, Venetim is the one delivering the bad news. The clearest demonstration of Venetim's personality is how he lies. When people hear he's a con man, they expect someone manipulative and calculating. In reality, Venetim simply says whatever comes to mind. He speaks fast, loudly, and without thinking things through. Yet somehow, his lies still work. As the commander and the hero's leader, at least in name, Venetim stayed off the battlefield and worked under the watch of a royal correctional officer. That meant he had to look useful and in control at all times. He needed the officer to think that only he could handle a group of violent criminals. Venetim played the part perfectly, acting like the brain keeping everything together. Or at least, that's what he wanted the officer to believe. The problem is that the real Venetim was unreliable and mostly useless. None of the heroes fully trusted his words. Even during emergencies, his promises were usually empty. When he said he would help or look into something, it was almost always an act. Most of the time, he never planned to do anything at all. Venetim's strongest weapon was his voice. He was loud enough to talk over even the Holy Knight captains, and confident enough to take charge of any meeting. His job was to negotiate with the Holy Knights and officers to get weapons, food, more help, or better treatment for the unit, since they usually got the most dangerous jobs. Even Xylo was impressed by how Venetim could pull strong arguments out of nowhere. Though not literally, Venetim also served as a shield. Because he handled communications with the higher-ups, he could hide certain truths and cover up secrets that Xylo and Teorita needed to keep buried. At the same time, Venetim would even lie to his own allies. When Venetim said something was difficult, it really meant, I don't think this can be done, but if I say that, you'll get mad and think I'm useless, so I'll just call it difficult instead. Weirdly enough, that actually made him trustworthy in his own way. In battle, Venetim can say in absolute confidence that he was more useless than Dotta. Still, he might be the only person who could bring out Tatsuya's full strength. He had known Tatsuya longer than anyone else in the unit, and seemed to know a special way to push him into fighting at 100%. Before becoming a hero, Venetim lived off swindling people. His most famous scam involved trying to sell the royal castle to a circus, which started as a simple land deal spiraled out of control. He created fake palace relocation plans, lied to tradesmen, issued quotes, raised money, and even prepared forged documents from the Chancellor's office as things snowballed beyond anything he'd imagined. By the time the circus arrived, carpenters, vendors, and protesters had flocked the area. Venetim panicked and tried to hide until he could escape the capital, but he was caught before he could flee. Oddly enough, this scam had almost nothing to do why he was sentenced to be a hero. Venetim had committed far more crimes: investment fraud, fake antiques, lottery scams, and financing violations. The Verkal Development Corporation alone had filed over 100 lawsuits against him. Whenever interrogated, Venetim always gave the same story. He said he hated seeing people disappointed, a feeling he claimed to have carried since childhood. The details of the story always changed though. Sometimes it felt true, other times it sounded like another lie. In the end, Venetim simply made up whatever story worked in the moment and tried to keep his lies consistent. But the real reason for his sentencing was a newspaper article. Due to his Kira-level lying skills, Venetim had been working as a journalist for a low-tier paper called the Livio Chronicle. The tabloid focused on creepy stuff, such as occult stories, scandals, wild conspiracies, and rumors about the demon blight. When they ran out of gossip about knights and goddesses and couldn't find any new dirt on the royal family, they asked him to write something that would scare people. And that's exactly what he did. Venetim wrote an article called The Demon Lord's Secret Invasion. It said that spies corrupted by the demon blight were already living among humans, and that the temple, Galtiel, and the royal family had been taken over. He used real names too, including high-ranking priests, generals, and officials. Fraud was nothing compared to this. But what the investigator said next completely shocked Venetim. During the investigation, he was told that these truths could not be allowed to spread, especially not through someone as good as Venetim at making lies sound real. And so, Venetim Leopold was sentenced to be a hero. But that's just the beginning. In truth, Venetim concealed a far more vicious secret, and came this close to saving the entire world. If you want to avoid the spoiler and save the reveal, skip ahead to this part for the prodigy hero. The real turning point came when Venetim revealed a secret he had been hiding for years. He used it as a bargaining chip to ease one of the unit's missions, exposing a part of his past he never wanted anyone to know. Venetim had hidden treasure inside the Verkal Development Corporation's vault. He also had a tattoo on his skin made of 4 special lines. The clearest explanation of this system is how Verkle Corp raised gifted children. They would adopt promising kids and support them until they were strong enough to stand on their own. When that time came, the corporation provided a loan, paid in gold coins from the Old Kingdom. The amount of money depended on how many lines the child had marked on their body. Someone with 4 lines was extremely rare. That level of funding was enough to immediately hire workers and start a large-scale business. Venetim still had access to this capital, and Verkle Corp continued managing it for him. Even after his imprisonment, this money remained untouched inside the corporation's vault. But things became clear when the truth behind the tattoos surfaced. Venetim was never adopted by Verkle Corp. He was the biological son of the company's president. His real name was Venetim Verkle. Not too long ago, people started talking about a new company challenging Verkle Corp called Modelis. On the surface, it worked like a bank, letting people make safe deposits and withdrawals. But it also secretly ran some operations that were technically illegal. Even so, the company was growing and even had the temple's backing. The truth, though, was that Modelis Corporation didn't really exist, and it caused Verkle Corp to lose a ton of money. And at the center of it all was Venetim, which made his brother absolutely furious. The biggest surprise was that the company never thought Venetim was worth all 4 lines of promise. Venetim had actually carved 3 of them himself to make his lies seem real. Even though he really was the president's son, the family thought he was such an embarrassment that they quietly cut all ties with him. Norgal Sinridge I, also known to the unit as His Majesty. Acting like a true big shot at all times, Norgal demands to be addressed as royalty, and openly declares himself as the king of the United Kingdom of Zethzael Metkiel. Naturally, someone like that did not fit into society. When his supposed castle was taken from him, he began committing terrorist attacks against what he called traitors. What made the situation far worse was that Norgal was unbelievably talented at tuning sacred seals. Because of this, the damage he caused was massive, costing both the military and the royal castle countless losses. After that, he was put on trial and sentenced to join Penal Hero Unit 9004. The clearest demonstration of Norgal's genius lies in how he tunes sacred seals. In sentenced to be a hero, sacred seals require extreme precision. Even one wrong curve can greatly affect the power and stability. Normally, several artisans must work together using blueprints to tune a weapon-grade seal. But Norgal could do all of that alone. He could tune seals with perfect balance and output by himself, something almost no one else could do. Even though Norgal acted like he was better than everyone else, he showed real respect for Teorita. He believed she was the goddess who protected his people, so he treated her with care and respect. If you listen to Norgal talk for too long, you might actually start believing the big things he said about himself. The best move was to stop talking to him before that happened. But his charisma was not useless. His biggest contributions occur when the unit needs manpower. Norgal could rally ordinary miners, mercenaries, and adventurers and lead them into battle against fairies or the Demon Blight. Even without combat experience, their attacks became powerful because Norgal personally tuned their seals. But things became clear when his leadership skills stood out even more than his genius. Norgal could create blueprints that anyone could understand, even for complex sacred seal engraving. With his guidance, he could basically turn ordinary people into skilled craftsmen almost instantly. It's not a surprise that Norgal could create countless seal-powered tools and weapons. One example was a lantern he tuned himself. It could be used for communication and cooking at the same time. Normally, devices like that required multiple experts to design and engrave, yet Norgal handled everything alone. However, his creations were not without danger. His biggest flaw showed when he designed overly complex and deadly traps. One of these was an execution device called Zolin Volkov, meaning the Judge of Fools. Anyone who approached carelessly would be skewered and then burned by flames hot enough to melt rock. The trap used decoys and false triggers, but the real danger was activated when someone touched the storage crate. The problem was that it could also annihilate their allies if they were careless. Despite this, Norgal's tuning made ordinary weapons stronger and longer lasting than normal. He could turn simple tools like pickaxes into powerful weapons by adding protection seals and destructive seals strong enough to destroy boulders. Later in the novel, he introduced what he called a revolutionary new weapon, which allows it so that only fairies with extreme sharp claws or fangs could break through. Any fairy caught in it became an easy target, so much so that even Dotta could hit them. As for his own combat style, it was almost non-existent. He was a large man, and that was it. In the past, Norgal was the last disciple of Sage Hordiax and a famous genius of the Academy. You know the drill. If you're not ready for the major spoilers about His Majesty's past, Skip to the timestamp on screen for the unit's prodigy sniper. His Majesty's past grew even more complicated when his connection to the royal family was revealed. He referred to Princess Melnietis as his dear younger sister, even though she did not understand why. The truth was that Norgal was an artificial hero. His closest friend was Lotzer Zefziel Metkio, the crowned prince. But Lotzer had already given up on his chance to be king when his younger brother was born. Instead, he chose to become a scholar at the temple. During that time, he met Norgal. Lotzer believed Norgal was the greatest sacred seal genius alive, and that his work would advance seal technology by decades. Everything fell apart when assassins targeted Lotzer. The same faction that later set Xylo up tried to cut him down. Norgal was gravely wounded protecting his friend, but they somehow defeated the assassin and escaped through an underground passage to the royal palace. As Norgal lay dying, he begged Lotzer to abandon him and survive. In the end, Norgal died. Back then, his personality was very different from his current one, who views himself as the king, and there's a reason for that. When Lotzer was captured and imprisoned, a man named Kavsin infiltrated the prison to save him. To escape, Lotzer needed to die and be sentenced as a hero, but Lotzer believed he lacked what it took to be one. Instead, he proposed to reviving Norgal and sentencing him as a hero in his place. The full process of being sentenced to be a hero and its history deserves a video of its own, so I'll spare you the spoilers for now. Looking back, Lotzer believed Norgal deserved to be remembered as the greatest sacred seal tuner ever. He agreed to let Norgal's personality disappear, even though he knew how cruel that was. Norgal's crimes were made up, and his memories were changed. Parts of Lotzer's own thoughts and beliefs were added to create an artificial hero. Lotzer also said it was okay to use his body. But since Melnietis saw Norgal as Norgal and not as her brother Lotzer, it made more sense they use Norgal's body instead. By mixing in Lotzer's memories and personality, they turned Norgal into a man with a strong idea of how a king should rule. The result was a warped being, stitched together from multiple personalities and memories. That same day, Lotzer vanished completely, and the artificial hero known as Norgal Sinridge was born. Savv. Savv is the unit's sniper. He is a super elite gunman who was raised from childhood by an order of assassins. He spends money like water, gambles terribly, and treats most things in life casually. Despite that, his role in the unit is deadly serious. When something needs to be blasted from very far away, Savv is the one who does it. Savv regrouped with Xylo's unit after serving alone on the western battlefront. Before that, he had been lent to the 9th Night Order, where he completed his assignment by sniping a demon lord at the perfect moment, allowing the Order's goddess to finish it off with lethal poison. He carries a long lightning staff on his back called Daisy. It was first made by the Verkal Development Corporation as a sniper weapon, but King Norgal changed it so much that the original seals couldn't be recognized. Norgal focused only on making it shoot from very far away, pushing it past its original limits. The power and accuracy of the weapon, though, depends completely on Savv. When Savv fires Daisy, a bolt of lightning shoots through the air and threads between trees in an instant. He can hit a target more than 1,200 steps away. However, Daisy cannot fire shots in quick succession since it's built purely for distance and power. Among snipers, Savv was likely the best lightning staff user Xylo had ever seen. Though not at Dotta's level, Savv has great eyesight. His accuracy was basically unmatched, even by the snipers from Kivaya's unit. Savv can strike fairies swimming across a moat cleanly in the head or the heart every time, and he makes it look easy. However, Savv's past training was brutal. The order that raised him treated training like endless suffering. He was thrown into underground dungeons, abandoned in the wilderness with only a knife, and attacked by wild animals and fellow trainees. Like most assassin organizations, they were forbidden from bonding with others. That isolation was one reason Savv talked non-stop later in life. You see, Savv believed he was too kind. Whenever he learned about a target's life, he could not bring himself to end their life. If someone had a family, children, or a sick grandpa, his kindness overwhelms him to the point he can't bring himself to end them at all. Because of this, his success rate at finishing off his actual targets was 0%. But the real contradiction came from how he handled failure. When the Order demanded proof, Savv would annihilate random people instead. He would turn strangers into corpses and let his real targets escape. Because of this, he believed he was a good person. That belief was almost shattered when the Order eventually abandoned him anyway. Savv believed being kind was his biggest weakness, and it was a weight he had carried for years. He chose his targets based on how he felt, and how hard they were to assassinate. Once he started caring about someone, he could no longer bring himself to deliver their final breaths. To him, people and rocks were almost the same. But to everyone suffering, Savv could not stop talking. With superhuman lung capacity, he can talk non-stop for an entire night without sleeping. According to him, his training included staying awake for 3 days straight while talking from dawn till dusk. Dotta once had to share a room with him before, and you can imagine how nightmarish it was for him. Even short walks combined with Savv's ramblings were enough to drive Teorita and Kivaya mad. The assassin group that raised Savv was called Gwynmosa, meaning the light which purges sin. Savv was one of their elite members. A child prodigy, he's the youngest and strongest assassin they have ever produced. Yet despite all that talent, he never once completed a proper assassination. According to Savv, Gwynmosa performed human sacrifices and captured children to offer them to goddesses. Even Savv believed they were pure evil. And despite all their attempts to brainwash him through pain and pleasure, he never accepted their sense of right and wrong. He was eventually arrested under the name Savv, known on the streets as the Man-Eating Ghoul. He was accused of sending 8 people to their graves, but Savv, being Savv, corrected them and said he actually assassinated 12. Because he turns his victims into mincemeat, there are rumors claiming he turned them into his own rations. In the end, the death penalty was not enough, and he was sentenced to be a hero. Outside of combat, Savv also served as the unit's medic. His deep understanding of how to destroy the human body allowed him to save lives when needed. Ironically, the same knowledge that made him a perfect assassin made him a skilled medic. He also has a unique style of hand-to-hand combat that is unlike anything Xylo had ever seen. He would grab some parts of his opponent's body, throw them to the ground, and dispose of them in one movement. Interestingly, Savv's dream was to open a cafe, one where women in special costumes greeted customers and spent time with them. Maid outfits, temple uniforms, cat ears, dog ears, basically things people never got to wear in normal life in this world. Rhino is the unit's artilleryman. He is a volunteer who had committed no crimes before joining the unit. Despite speaking like a man of virtue, there's always been something deeply unsettling about him. Rhino fights wearing a suit of armor engraved with sacred seals and shows skill far beyond what most heroes can match. As the unit's artilleryman, Rhino fought beside the cavalryman, Jayce, as they were sent together to the Western Front. To Xylo, Rhino was harder to read than almost anyone else. As Savv put it, Rhino was bad news. Unlike the others, he had volunteered to become a hero, which only made him more suspicious. The clearest demonstration of Rhino's nature is his bittersweet relationship with prison cells. You see, heroes were rarely placed in prison cells, since their punishment was meant to be endless combat, death, and resurrection. Rhino was an exception. He ignored orders constantly, so much so that he was often placed in solitary confinement. What was meant to be punishment felt like a favorite end to him. Obviously, he showed no regret, no intention of changing, and spent nearly half a year locked away. One of his biggest incidents came during a mission alongside Jace. Rhino suddenly abandoned his post and ran to a nearby settlement. There, he attacked a horde of fairies alone, forcing the military to defend the civilians. At the time, the official strategy was to abandon all settlements west of the defensive line. Thanks to Rhino ignoring it completely, his actions bought civilians time to escape and saved lives. But for the commanders, it was a nightmare. Among the penal heroes, only Rhino could talk like a true hero and say things like protecting the abandoned and the weak with complete seriousness. He spoke like a priest, or a teacher, yet Xylo found him extremely suspicious. The biggest contradiction came from his actions. For saying stuff like that, this whackjob would smile as he blew up houses if he believed it would save lives. His view of human life is completely twisted. Rhino believed suffering should be shared equally. To him, pain created bonds. He thought it was beautiful. During one mission, he calmly suggested deciding the order in which civilians should be sacrificed. What could not be denied was his skill. In this world, artillery was a new and complex field that required a deep understanding of sacred seals. It was unknown where Rhino learned it, but no one else in the unit could replicate what he did. In battle, he wore a suit of armor made from a strange steel with a dull red shimmer. His body was short and stocky, almost insect-like, with absurdly large arms. His right arm was a hollow cylinder engraved with sacred seals, functioning as a cannon. This armor was called the Nevin Artillery Seal Compound. It was still in testing by the military, making it a mystery how Rhino obtained it. When he fired, flames would swallow entire streets in an instant. By the time the shockwave reached the fairies, they were already dust. All that remained was a crater. These attacks were dangerous, even to dragons and dragon knights. The seal powering his weapon was called Tewis Newts, meaning impatient firefly. It consumed enormous amounts of luminescence, but the payoff was a blast strong enough to destroy steel-framed castle walls. The weapon was hard to aim and required physical shells, yet Rhino handled it with absurd precision. He could adjust luminescence and fire within a single breath and still hit his target every time. His long-range attacks defied common sense. Rhino claimed it was all math. If the variables could be calculated, the shot was possible. Instead of just adjusting after each shot like other artillerymen, Rhino fired multiple shells in rapid succession and then waited. Interestingly, he has multiple notebooks filled with overly complicated mathematical formulas that were apparently records of what he had learned and the fruits of his labor. This approach solved one of artillery's biggest weaknesses. Artillery units struggled in fast-moving battles. While Rhino still lagged behind cavalry, his preparation allowed him to act decisively before conditions changed. When artillery was not suitable, he could also fight with a short spear. His armor could also generate a defensive barrier. Despite the protection being limited and not unbreakable, shots could bounce off it. As an adventurer, Rhino was known as the Slithering Shark. He spent years exploring ruins and often fought other adventurers. He was infamous in the north, with rumors claiming he erased fellow adventurers, even those who worked with him. Though Rhino claimed to be a former adventurer and never part of the military, his mastery of Sacred Seal technology suggested otherwise. Even his family name was unknown to most heroes. In fact, everything about him felt wrong. But before I reveal Rhino's crime and who he really is, here's a quick spoiler warning. If you want to avoid this reveal, skip ahead to the timestamp on screen for the next hero. If you're still here, here's why Rhino was bad news. Rhino was extremely knowledgeable about fairies and demon lords. Other heroes sometimes saw him return after battles, carrying a living fairy with a huge smile on his face. They know he was experimenting on them for fun. But the real reason he disappears after battle is that he chases the fairy leader of the demon lord in secret. You see, when the demon blight starts devouring its surroundings, its demon lord gives off a unique wave, and other demon lords can detect this. Suspiciously, Rhino could track their waves. According to Rhino, his crime is the simplest, least offensive crime among those of the hero unit. He murdered his own kind just for fun. At some point, he started enjoying destroying others like himself, and he became really interested in humans. He was so amazed by humans that Rhino even felt like turning himself in on purpose. He wanted to say things like, "I'll do whatever you want." Being around the other heroes made him realize how empty he felt inside, and that pushed him to desperately want human approval. He was willing to suffer if it meant humans would accept him. Rhino believed he only truly belonged with humans, where he could be seen as a hero and judged for nothing else. Rhino Molchet's true identity was Demon Lord Puck Puka, but to humans, he retained the identity of his body's original owner. Tatsuya. Tatsuya is the berserker of the Penal Hero Unit and the strongest infantryman among them. He has been a hero for longer than anyone can remember. After dying and being brought back to life countless times, he lost his ego, his thoughts, and even his ability to speak. What remains is the battle monster known as the Cackling Ogre. No one knows his crime. No one even knows his past for sure. His real name was unknown to most, and everyone simply called him Tatsuya. He was the longest-serving member of the unit, and the living proof of what the hero's punishment truly was. Each revival stripped something away. In Tatsuya's case, it took everything. He could only groan when reacting to external stimuli. This slow destruction of the mind was part of the sentence, and Tatsuya was its final result. According to rumors, Tatsuya was a human summoned from another world by a goddess. Others claimed he angered that goddess. Some whispered that he was summoned because he was exceptionally good at passing judgment, and others spread darker stories about his past. But none of it changed anything. Tatsuya had neither an ego nor the ability to think for himself. He was just a hero who fought because he was ordered to. The clearest demonstration of Tatsuya's power is how he fights. When ordered, he charges forward with his battle axe. He moves at incredible speeds, and the force of his blows is terrifying. Even his bare fists can shatter the hard shells of fairies and crush their heads. Like a wild beast, Tatsuya tears through enemies with absurd speed and strength. He excels in tight spaces, using walls and ceilings as footholds. One moment he is clinging to a wall, and the next he is slicing through enemies below. When the last enemy falls, Tatsuya simply stands still among the remains and stares at the ceiling. To the Holy Knights who witness this, he does not look human. That is how he earned the nickname Cackling Ogre. But the real reason he never seems to tire is not endurance. While he could keep going as if exhaustion wasn't in his dictionary, Tatsuya lacks a sense of self and cannot judge his own limits. If pushed too far, even he will eventually collapse. Though known for his axe, Tatsuya can use other weapons. During a fight with trolls and goblins, he seized a lightning staff and began firing bolts with it. No one had ever seen him use a Sacred Seal weapon before. When the staff ran out of charge, he replaced its luminescent cylinder with another and continued firing. The only conclusion was that he knew exactly how the weapon worked. He often stole his enemies' weapons, or used their bodies as shields, so this was probably just another example of how he fought. Later in the novel, he was handed an enormous lightning staff made by the Verkal Corporation. It was the Howgut Blaster Seal Compound, a weapon normally requiring multiple operators. The Howgut Blaster was made to shoot fast blasts over a wide area. Its damage is different from the heavy cannon armors used by artillery fighters. To everyone's surprise, Tatsuya's body can change. Tatsuya can make his bones and muscles grow bigger, swelling in a strange way as he lifted the huge weapon with no trouble. In fact, Tatsuya was easily waving around the massive weapon with his meaty arms, sending bolts of lightning trailing left and right. If Tatsuya truly came from Penal Hero Unit 9001, then he fought in the First War of Subjugation. That was the only recorded victory mankind ever had against the Demon Blight, a time where heroes summoned from other worlds were far stronger. If that were true, it might explain his impossible feats. You see, there's actually some truth to the rumors about who Tatsuya really is. If you want in on the fun, keep watching. If not, skip to the timestamp on screen for the next hero. The real turning point came when Venetim revealed a secret. He alone knew how to make Tatsuya fight at full power. Venetim would whisper into his ear and give him a signal, saying, "Please fight like the true hero that you are. I'm counting on you." The moment Tatsuya heard that, he disappeared. He moved so fast that no one could follow him. Fairy bodies flew everywhere as he zipped across the battlefield. Tatsuya moved like a whirlwind, and no fairy could get close. His speed was so crazy that Venetim and the knights couldn't even see him anymore. Then Tatsuya would let out a screech that sounded almost like laughter. Even Abaddon, a demon king who could read minds, was relieved he never faced Tatsuya, since his ability did not work on him. From how Neely treated him, it was clear that Tatsuya was different, almost not human. Neely sometimes acted like Xylo and Rhino were just kids, but she never treated Tatsuya that way. Instead, she treated him like a respected elder or an ancient tree, someone who deserved honor and respect. In truth, Tatsuya's real name was Tatsuya Ninagawa. He was the spitting image of a legendary hero. According to the stories, the first goddess had summoned the 9 stars of destiny during the First War of Subjugation. Venetim had even heard tales of that war and knew about the 9 stars. There was the bodiless Grand Sage and founder, Vlad the Sealed, Avili the Cursed Sigil, Nij the Glutton, Yukihito the Judge, and a few others. While the names of 8 of them had been known, the 9th had been lost to history. All that remained was a description. They say he descended, wielding a sword and a radiant beam of light. Eventually, he transformed himself into a divine beast and fought the Demon Blight. The name of the 9th star, the one who wears the flesh of the sacred beast, is lost to the world. All we know is that he was a holy warrior with an unusual appearance, summoned from a foreign world long, long ago. However, that nameless 9th star was surely Tatsuya. Jayce Parteract. Jayce is the unit's cavalryman and one of the most dangerous fighters alive. He is a penal hero and a dragon knight who specializes in aerial combat. Among dragon knights, he is considered the strongest in the world. The thing is, he cares very little about human laws and is interested only in winged creatures. Jayce was sent to the Western Front alongside Rhino. He fights from the sky, riding his dragon partner Neely, a female dragon. She was unmistakably Jayce's type, and she was also one of the few beings capable of stopping him when he went too far toward humans. Naturally, Jayce cared more about dragons than people. In this world, dragons were raised by the military from a young age to be used in war. There were only a few hundred dragon knights in the Federation Kingdom, each acting as an independent unit. The clearest demonstration of Jayce's personality is how little he cares about humans. Dragons loved him, and he loved them back. He took care of them constantly, and they always gathered around him. Female dragons especially seemed drawn to him, much to Neely's annoyance. During meals, dragons would lay their heads in his lap or offer him food from their mouths. To Xylo, it looked like some noble women crowding around a highborn lord at a banquet. Jayce was sentenced to the Penal Hero Unit for 2 crimes. The first was the smuggling of banned products. He cultivated plants meant to improve dragon health, but those same plants could also be used as narcotics by humans. The second crime came when Jayce led a revolt against the military in an attempt to free the dragons. For an ordinary person, the revolt would have ended quickly. But Jayce was a powerful noble, and the dragons adored him, especially female dragons. According to records, Jayce led the dragons in a direct attack on the second capital. The incident became known as Jayce's Rebellion. Before we dive into Jayce's backstory and how he understands dragons, quick spoiler heads up. If you want to skip this reveal, jump to the timestamp on screen for more about his abilities. The real reason Jayce fought came from his past. He was raised by dragons. A dragon named Ugraf took him in as a child. Growing up, Jayce believed he was a dragon. Once, he jumped from a cliff, believing he would grow wings. He nearly died. Despite that, his childhood was never lonely. But everything changed when he learned the truth. His friends dreamed of becoming knights dragons, protectors of the world. Jayce wanted the same, but he had no wings. When he asked Ugrif when his wings would grow, he was told the truth. Jayce had been abandoned because of a strange birthmark called a stigma on his back. That stigma gave him power called attune. It allowed him to understand the vocalizations of any living creature as words. That was why he could speak with dragons. Neely was special among dragons. Ugrif said she was the only remaining true primordial dragon born to fight the demon blight, a descendant of the great leader Kukulkan. When Jayce was devastated by the truth, Neely offered to become his dragon. She let him ride her back, but made him promise to fight for the world, even for strangers he did not care about. Reluctantly, Jayce accepted. In his heart, Jayce fought not for humans, but for the world where dragons lived. If protecting everyone was the price, he would pay it. Soon after, humans discovered him during the Dragon Seeking Festival. The Parteract family took him in. He became known as the boy raised by dragons. Jayce later found out about a general's plan that involved dragons, and that's what sparked his rebellion. Many humans died, but Jayce and Neely thought sacrificing hundreds of dragons was just wrong, as humans would lose their advantage in the skies. That choice landed Jayce in the Penal Hero Unit. For him, the most important thing was protecting the dragons, or at least protecting Neely. But Neely wouldn't let him stop there. The truth is, Jayce never wanted to be a hero, and he feels a lot of pressure to save the world. In battle, Jayce and Neely were a nightmare. Neely could rain down streams of fire from the sky, powerful enough to burn enemies to the bone. The problem is that Jayce never hesitated over civilian casualties. Jayce wields a short spear engraved with sacred seals for sniping flying fairies. He had once traveled the continent, entering martial arts tournaments and winning them all. He did it only for prize money, which he used to care for dragons. He was so strong that a certain princess from an extremely wealthy noble family had once asked for his hand in marriage. The worst he can say is no. People called him Jayce the Rumbling Wind. A single thrust of his spear strike could punch straight through a steel helmet and shatter a skull. Even when held rather than thrown, the spear hit like a flying mass of iron. In the air, Jayce and Neely were on a level no other Dragon Knight could match. Their sharp turns, sudden climbs, and mid-air somersaults were impossible for most riders to replicate. Even if someone understood the technique, their body could not handle the strain. Neely herself was exceptional, able to control speed, posture, and flame breath with incredible precision. This made the Jayce-Neely pair a threat even Demon Lords recognized. In fact, constantly competing over who could defeat more Demon Lords is commonplace between Jayce and Xylo. Interestingly, Jayce respected Dotta. He spoke highly of him for trying to help a dragon escape and even allowing it to eat his arm. Or at least that's how he interpreted his story. Jayce once offered Dotta a dragon so he could scout from the sky, and even volunteered to train him. Although it sounded like he was trying to set Dotta up with his niece, it was an extremely rare gesture and showed just how highly Jayce regarded him. Now, while this video has already been full of spoilers, this next one is easily the biggest bombshell for anime onlys. Tatsuya Kivia is the former captain of the 13th Order of the Holy Knights and a current member of the Penal Hero Unit. She was originally meant to form a pact with the goddess Teorita. Instead, after slaying her own uncle, she was sentenced to fight as a hero. When Kivia first appeared in the story, she had just been appointed captain. Her order was new, and she took her role seriously from the start. As a Holy Knight, her armor was specially engraved with sacred seals. When activated, it releases flames that lit up the battlefield and prevented enemies from launching counterattacks. The clearest demonstration of Kivia's skill is her swordsmanship. Her style was described as elegant, closer to short spear techniques than traditional sword fighting. She focused on thrusts and counters from a low stance, the complete opposite of the heavy swinging style, where you just swung as hard as you could, which Xylo learned. Interestingly, Kivia joined the military to rebel against her family. Her parents were priests of the temple, part of a class known as noble priests. These noble priests held land and authority granted after the founding of the Federated Kingdom. Although they have power and faith, they have no skills that would benefit them in the real world. In short, they don't have a salary, so many abused their position. They sold temple rolls, accepted bribes, and claimed land under false religious construction site projects to make themselves rich. Kivia hated this system. Her uncle, High Priest Marlin, supported her after she ran away from home. He became her main source of support, and Kivia wanted to be the shield that protected his ideals. But the real turning point came when she learned the truth. Marlin had joined the Coexisters, the same group that framed Xylo. They believed in coexisting with demons and fairies and planned to replace the temple's leadership with fellow Coexisters. Claiming he did it to protect his family, Marlin asked Kivia to join them. Kivia refused. When Marlin cut down her subordinate Rajit, who tried to protect her, Kivia eliminated her uncle. That same day, she was arrested and framed for both deaths. In prison, investigators repeated a false story over and over, claiming Kivia finished off her uncle out of fear of his influence and betrayed mankind. Everything changed when two people appeared before her cell and revealed secrets about the world and what heroes truly were. Kivia was given two choices: accept the false charges and receive the death penalty, or fall for good and be revived as a penal hero so she could continue fighting the demon blight. Her decision? Kivia chose to become a hero. When she reappeared with the sacred seal on her neck, Xylo and the others were completely stunned. The best proof of her value as a hero showed up right away. Almost immediately, Kivia started joining strategy meetings with Venetim. She gathered accurate military information and stopped Venetim from saying anything stupid. This saved Xylo time and effort and made operations smoother. Funny enough, Venetim also gained a shield, since Kivia could handle Xylo when bad news arrived. But her real strength was on the battlefield. Even Tsav admitted he was unsure he could defeat her in a fair fight. Xylo called her a warrior with the strength of a wild bear. To him, that was high praise. Of course, Kivia didn't appreciate being compared to them. As a hero, Kivia became an exceptional cavalry soldier. During battles against Demon Blight, she charges from the rear, activating the Sacred Seal compound on her armor meant for sneak attacks. With her seal-engraved lance, any fairy that touched them was burned, stunned, or blasted away. In minutes, entire enemy flanks were wiped out. Kivia could smash through the enemy's defenses over and over to give her team a chance to regroup. She was the kind of soldier everyone in the unit depended on when things went completely wrong. Her most important scenes showed textbook cavalry tactics. With her, the Penal Hero Unit finally had a true cavalry leader. If Xylo was absent, Kivia naturally took command. From the skies, Jace could see her leadership skills. The worse the situation became, the sharper her decisions were. She was always one step ahead of the enemy. In close combat without sacred seals, Kivia was terrifying. She was likely better with a sword than both Xylo and Jace. Jace believed her overall combat ability was second only to Tatsuya. Basically, he had no desire to fight her. And on a much smaller note, Kivia was clearly jealous of Frenzy whenever she was around Xylo. And that's every hero and sentenced to be a hero. Which hero did you like the most, and which one do you think never should have been sentenced in the first place? Drop your picks in the comments. And if you want to go deeper into this world, click the video on your screen for more lore.